into a rule, we want to simplify this, what would we do? I want you to try and write this down. So let's pause the video again. You could even talk to your neighbor if you need to. This rule is called the rule of multiplying indices. I want you to write down a rule, and this can be like in the form of x for your base number. So x to the power of something times x to the power of something else equals x to the power of whatever you think it equals. So see if you can write down a rule. Take 1 minute. Talk to your neighbor if you need to. So the rule of multiplying indices, right? If we go back for a second, right? If we turn this into an x, right? 2 is now x, so it can be any number. And we turn these into values like a and b, so they can be different numbers. We could say that x to the a times x to the b equals x to the a plus b, right? Because with our 2, we did our 3 plus 5 equals 8, right? So this is the rule of multiplying indices. X to the power of a times x to the power of b equals x to the power of a plus b. So here is another question. Does this work with a and b being negative numbers? Fractions? What do you think? So again, I'd like you to discuss, maybe turn to the person next to you, pause the video, take 1 minute, write down your answer in your notebook. So the answer is yes. This works for negative numbers and fractions too. Why would this work for negative numbers and fractions too? Well, we know what negative numbers mean, right? They're just 1 divided by our base, however many times our indice, whatever our indice is. So that kind of makes sense that that would work as well. But fractions, we haven't done fractions yet. So let's look at fractions as indices. Also, you do want to remember this, so write that down. Question. So, what does the number 2 to the power of 1 over 3 mean? What does this mean? 2 to the power of 1 over 3. Remember what an indice means, right? Go back to that definition. So I want you to go back and look at that definition right now. And then pause the video, take a minute, maybe a minute 30 if you need it. And I want you to try and explain what the number 2 to the power of 1 over 3 means. Write it down in your notebook. I'll give you a second. So, let's think about this. So go with me for a second. If we use the rule for multiplying indices, right, which is adding up all of the indices, and we, for instance, do 2 to the power of 1 over 3 multiplied by itself 3 times, right? 2 to the 1 over 3 times 2 to the 1 over 3 times 2 to the 1 over 3. We would get this, right? We add up these thirds. 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 gives us 1, right? And that would mean, looking at our definition for an indice, it would be 1 times the base 1 time, so 1 times 2 equals 2. So what does 2 to the 1 over 3 mean? So take a second. This is another hint, right? Talk to your neighbor again. What does 2 to the power of 1 over 3 mean? Maybe take another minute. Pause the video. Okay, so we can say that 2 to the power of 1 over 3 represents the number that, when we multiply it against itself 3 times, gives us 2, right? So x times x times x equals 2, right? That's what it means. Or 9, for instance. Or let's think about this. What would the cube? 27, right? 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So that would be what? To put it back in these terms. See if you can write that down. We're going to move on and I'll come back to that one, okay? So, our question now. If a cube has a volume of 2 centimeters cubed, how long is one side if the side is s long, all right? So the cube has a volume of 2, total volume. How long is one side? Take a moment, pause the video, see if you can figure it out. Okay, so the volume of a cube is equal to what? It is equal to the side length times itself 3 times. So we could say that the volume is equal to the side length to the third power, right? 1 times the side length times the side length times the side length. We know that the volume is equal to 2, right? We have that information. So we could say 2 is equal to the side length to the third power. So s is the number that, when we multiply it against itself 3 times, gives us 2. This should remind you of something, right? We just learned. S is the number that, when we multiply it against itself 3 times, gives us 2. So S is the same thing as 2 to the power of 1/3, right? So write what S is equal to. If you haven't already figured it out, maybe pause the video, give you 30 seconds. Write what S is equal to. Okay, so if 2 equals s to the power of 3, then s is equal to 2 to the power of 1/3, right? So here we can see the fractions. And to go back to that 27 question, 27 to the power of 1/3 is 3, right? That was the answer to that one too. Okay, so let's keep moving. In your own words, what does the number 5 to the power of 1/4 mean? 13 to the power of 1/7, 3 to the power of -1/2. So take a moment, maybe a minute or two, pause the video, and I would like you, by yourself, to write down what you think each of these things means. And remember what we just learned, right? Okay, so 5 to the power of 1/4 is the number that, when we multiply it by itself 4 times, gives us 5, or 1 times 5, right? So the number that, when we multiply it against itself 4 times, gives us 5, or 1 times 5, which means 13 to the power of 1/7 is the number that, when we multiply it against itself 7 times, gives us 13, or 1 times 13. What about this -1? What does that mean? So 3 to the power of -1/2 is the number that, when we multiply it against itself 2 times, gives us 1 divided by 1 times 3, or 1 divided by 3, right? So if you see the negative, right, we're doing division again. Positive multiplication, negative is division. So when we multiply it against itself, we get 1 over our base, 1/3. So keep that in mind as you see these positive and negatives. There is another way to write these numbers. We've actually seen it earlier in this slideshow, right? So 5 to the power of 1 over 4 is the fourth root of 5. This special symbol is the root symbol, right? So we can write this as this. This is the same thing as this. They both mean the same thing. We could write 13 to the power of 1 over 7 is the seventh root of 13. So the seventh root of 13. We can write 3 to the power of negative 1 over 2 as the square root of 1/3, right? So this negative, remember, is that division we're seeing here. The square root, which is this symbol, of 1/3. This one's interesting though, right? Because we said fourth, seventh, and now we're saying square. So wait, why don't we say the second root of? Why isn't it 2 root 1 over 3? So the answer to that is that x to the 1 over 2 is the length of a side of a square whose area is x, right? What is area equal to? Side length times side length, right? So x squared. Because we deal with squares so much, we often just call it the square root. We will use square root so often it gets its own special name, and we don't even have to write the 2, which is great. We also call x to the power of 1 over 3 the cube root. So if you see that, if you ever write like the second root of, most people will know what you're talking about, but this is the common word that we're going to use: square root and cube root if we're doing x to the power of 1, 3. If we're doing the cube root, we still will write that 3 there, but if it's the square root, you don't have to write any number. Yeah, we use the square root so often we leave off the 2 and write it just as this, the square root symbol. This is called the square root symbol, right? We include the number for every other root, including the cube root. So I'm going to do